Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to today's expert roundtable webinar, Mastering Cleanroom Compliance, Discovering Practical Strategies for Pharma Leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, before we kickstart, I would like to give a little introduction about myself. I am going to be the host and the moderator of this exciting session. I'm Vishali Jaiswal. And once again, on the behalf of Lindstrom, I extend a very warm and a very cheerful welcome to all of you. At Lindstrom, we are committed to providing solutions that empower industries to meet the highest benchmarks of hygiene, compliance, and operational excellence. In the pharma industry, clean room compliance is no longer just a regulatory checkbox. It is a business critical function that ensures product safety, safeguards patients' well being, and promotes long term industry growth. Well, before we proceed further, I would like to take a moment and thank each one of you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, taking out some time from your heavily packed schedule and marking this webinar with your glorious presence. To say that we are thrilled to see you is an absolute understatement. And, ladies and gentlemen, I have a great news to share with you all. Today, we are privileged to be joined by a panel of highly respected industry leaders. They bring decades of experience and will share deep insights and actionable strategies on navigating the increasingly complex world of clean room compliance. This is part of Lindstorm initiative to bring together thought leaders and innovators in pharma manufacturing through ongoing webinar session focused on future ready best practices. So without any further ado, let me introduce you all to the expert panelist. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, today joining in is Mr. Shyam Khante, President Shyam Khante and Associates. Formerly, he has worked with GSK as production director. He was the global head manufacturing of Dabur Pharma Limited, Free Seniors Kabi. Mr. Kante is an industry veteran with an impressive track record advising pharma organization on regulatory compliance, quality assurance, and risk management. So, welcome, Sham, sir. Nextly, today joining in, we have with us Mr. Manish Bhatkar, founder and CEO, Red Lotus Pharmatech Private Limited. Formerly, he has served as Senior Director and Head in Technical Services, Sterile Dosage Forms, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. He has also worked as Global Quality Head, Dabur Pharma, and has taken up leadership positions at Lupin, Zydus Cadila, Nishar Pharmaceuticals, St. Louis, and Pharmaplan India. Mr. Bhatkar brings a hands on implementation driven perspective, having led large scale projects focused on designing and operationalizing cleanroom environments in pharma settings. Moving on to the next panel member, we have with us Mr. Manas Kumar, Global Director, Pharma Vertical and Decontamination Lindstorm Group. With a strong foundation in pharma sector, hygiene and clean room operations, Mr. Kumar contributes global insights and best practices that help organizations enhance their compliance frameworks while driving operational efficiency. So, welcome, Mr. Manas.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. All right, so now it's time we kickstart the session. And without any further ado, I would request Mr. Sham to take this session forward, followed by Mr. Manish and Mr. Manas. Over to you all.
Everyone, I am delighted to welcome you to this special session on mastering clean room compliances. I am Shyam Khante, joined by my esteemed colleagues Manish and Manas. Together, we bring decades of frontline experience in GMP, sterile manufacturing, and regulatory consulting. Today's session will be practical, leadership focused, and rooted in real world field learnings. Let's begin. Manish, can I have the first slide?
Yeah.
Fine. Good afternoon once again. As I'm Shyam Khant again, a pharmaceutical professional, and I have got some experience in the field of manufacturing, QA, QC, GMP training, etc., etc. Over the decades, I have had the privilege of working with many organizations in India, USA, EU, Southeast Asia, supporting them in their GMP journey. My passion lies in transforming compliance culture, especially by working on behaviors, because real changes happen not in SOP, but in the people act, how they act, think, and lead on floor. Today's session, we will bring leadership level insight into three fronts: operational discipline, ownership culture, and sustain clean room integrity. Our goal is to help you beyond procedures and towards system, and just not the and only in practice, but just not in paper. Okay, can the next slide please?
Yeah.
Uh, Let me introduce my speaker. Of course, he was already introduced, but a little bit more in details. Manish has over 33 years of hands-on experience in sterline manufacturing, aseptic processing, validation, and regulatory compliance. He is a founder and CEO of Red Lotus, a firm which is a trusted partner for pharmaceutical organization seeking GMP consulting, regulatory strategy, and technical remediations. What sets Manish apart from his ability to bring gap between regulatory compliance and operational realities? He has helped multiple companies across the globe respond effectively to FDA, EU inspections, strengthen their contamination control strategy, and rebuild quality system with lasting impact. In this session, Manish shall share cleanroom compliance challenges from actual assignment, decode what regulators really expect, including from Annexure 1, WHO, and FDA, offer a risk-based leadership alliance strategy for sustainable compliance. He is a firm believer in shifting from procedural compliance to ownership-based compliance, and what we are going to explore today. Okay. Now, clean room failures. This is something which we keep hearing every now and then. And let me tell you that the fundamental truth here is the clean room failures, they do not occur inside the clean room. They start much earlier in the design phase. Most companies, for the want of saving some piddly funds here and there, they end up engaging some shoddy or some half-baked consultant, and they end up in designing very poor facilities. They just meet the guideline, but miserably lack with respect to many aspects during the construction. Again, how maintenance is done, how the procedures are written and understood. So these are all the reasons where the clean room failures originate from, and they are outside the clean room. By the time deviation shows up in grade A or grade B area, the root cause virtually lies somewhere upstream. It's not there in the clean room. The poor cost functional coordination, vague risk assessment, or decision made without life cycle thinking. So, if we really want to prevent contamination and the product sterility, we have to broaden our lens. Clean room control is just not a production issue. It's an organizational definitely. Let me tell you very frankly, whenever in the organization there are issues like some with some regulatory agency, the first question people ask is quality or quality assurance sleeping. That's not correct. It's everybody's responsibility. So why are we looking about the clean room compliance and why now? Are we digging the well when the fire is already on? Yes. Because globally we are witnessing a very heightened regulatory scrutiny. Regulators today just not are checking documents, they are looking at behavior, system performance, and culture behind the compliance. We have seen a steep rise in FDA warning letters, EU non-compliance report, WHO pre-qualification failures, and many linked directly to the lapses in contamination control, inadequate risk management, or poorly maintained procedures. There is no longer staying compliant on paper. There's no use, but it's about building transport system that actually works on real time and even under pressure or and across the teams. And this is what exactly this session is going to focus. Now, the question is why now? What matters? Why now? Okay. The regulatory landscape does not involve, it's undergoing. It's a fundamental transformation. In other word, I would like to say, which will be understood by everybody, transformation is not only conversion, it is from parivartan, just not a rupantar, it's a conversion. Parivartan is a transformation. It is built in with a lot of inputs, and that is why we call it a transformation. Inspectors today expect much more than compliance checklist. They want to see integrated system wherein contamination control, quality risk management, operators' behavior are aligned and not siloed. Normally, organization we tend to work in silos, but that is one of the things which the regulators do not want to happen. We are seeing a strong shift towards transformation based inspection, where the actual practice is scrutinized much more than the documentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't misunderstand me. I am not either undermining the importance of documentation. It has to be there wherever it is mandated, required, or so warranted. Then, importantly, the leadership is now being held accountable, not just QA or production. Regulators are asking. Everywhere we say that whose responsibility is that? We have been talking about, and that's what we are now trying to explore. Does the contamination control strategy reflect the risk issue? Do our people understand why they follow the procedure or not just why? In other words, it's not about know how, it is about know why. We should know why we are doing. How we are doing, yes, it is written, but why we are doing, that should be very clearly understood. That is where the strategy will originate. And the deviation happened, do you investigate deeply or just a tick mark analysis? Most places we find that there is a huge number of deviations. We have seen practically number of deviation, and most of them are closed by just stapling the pages. I'm not joking, and I have seen happening it. So if this is our understanding about closing the deviation, well, we are inviting for trouble. Okay. Now, what is common? Now, when we are talking about Annexure 1, WHO, and the FDA, what's common? Is there anything common? Yes. What's common is they are all emerging. They are all converging. So all of this you find there are a lot of common expectations. So that is one thing. It is there. A lot of things are listed in the slide, which you can see for yourself. This what is again common is a risk-based approach to the contamination control. Integration of the system like CCS, that is contamination control strategy, EM, environmental monitoring, and training. It's clear accountability for sustained sterility assurance. Look at that. The documentation are now wanting to pin down the clear accountability with respect to quality assurance. The convergence means that we no longer afford to prepare differently for each regulator. There is no confusion. People always talk about there are lot many guidelines, but yes, we have got to prepare for everybody in common. Instead, we must build a robust system that consistently meet global expectation, whether you are facing EU, FDA, or WHO. The mindset we want to explore further is because harmonization, it is just a regulatory shift. It's also a strategic opportunity. Now, let us see what I change. What I now after having seen what is common, now what I change. Is there any change? Yes, changes have been have been there. And the first and foremost, that now if we are just comparing the Annexure 1 2008 and 2022, uh, it's very elaborate. It's the sheer volume. I'm just talking sheer dimension of this documentation. So it is just not a routine update. It's a paradigm shift. It puts the contamination control strategy at the center of sterile manufacturing. Look at that. Again, the contamination control strategy is as the pivotal role. I mean, that's at the center of the manufacturing. It embeds the quality risk management in every step, from facility design to operator involvement. It raises the bar of barrier technology, environment monitoring, and life cycle process understanding. Perhaps most importantly, it moves from procedural mindset to a holistic system, one where the component including behavior, and contribute to the sterility assurance. Look at that. We are not talking about the sterility control or quality. We are talking about the assurance. More is the assurance, sky is the limit. But we have to build in more and more and more through all the factors listed above. The facility still focuses only if the for the facility or for the people or for the people who think that they only think of SOP and the grade classification. Let me tell you, this revision is a wake up call. In other words, it's a karo or maro kind of thing. So, unless you change strategically, I don't think there will be any ray of hope with respect to compliance. And the lastly, compliance now means providing your system work, not just your document in place. So, at the end of my talk, I would like to say that compliance doesn't mean the number of SOPs, it doesn't mean the number of papers, it doesn't mean the number of just sort of some bunch of paper you throw it on the face of regulator. It certainly means, does it solve the purpose? Does it meet the objective? Having said so, now I would request my colleague Manish to take over from here. Uh, Manish, probably you can now.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you, sir, and thank you, Vaishali, for a very good introduction. And thanks to Lindstorm for giving this opportunity to connect with so many people at the same time and share my knowledge and practical experience gained over the last 33 years um, with the audience. So, so before I dive into the compliance challenges and the strategy for the resolution or these challenges, um, I would like to start with the basics. You know, what exactly are we trying to protect our sterile products from? So, as per the Annex 1 version, revised version 2022 clearly lays out three broad categories of contamination that sterile manufacturing must control. First is microbiological, which includes live organisms like bacteria, fungi, or spores that can enter through air, people, materials, or equipment surfaces. And even one CFU in the wrong place can compromise the patient safety. So that is first. Second are the particulate matter, like fibers, dust, or glass particles that may come from packaging, gowning, or the equipment surfaces. And these, if they do not kill the patient, but they can cause, some reversible or irreversible damages, like, embolism, inflammation, or injection site trauma. And third is endotoxins or pyrogens. These are non-viable but toxic residues, especially from the gram-negative bacterial cell debris. And when they get into the human body, so perhaps they can cause severe febrile reactions if injected, right? So when we talk about contamination control, these are the threats we are trying to prevent in every batch, every shift, every intervention. And to prevent them, we must understand where they can come from. So, um, of course, there are other contaminants also, like the residues of the previous product and so on. But specifically in this talk, as well as in the essence of this specific um, presentation, I would focus only on these three contaminants. So now, that we know that what we are protecting our product against, uh, let's look at where the risk of contamination come from. What are the potential risk factors? And these are the seven which are uh, the most probable, potential risk factors, like premises and facility, equipment, critical support systems. That means utilities, materials, process, environment, and people. So what does it mean? Like, so if any of these elements, any of these seven elements are not designed properly or qualified, operated, cleaned, sanitized, sterilized, maintained, and routinely monitored, so perhaps they can act as, a kind of vector or potential risk factor, which can directly or indirectly, depending upon how close they are with your proximity of your product. So they have a potential to contaminate your products, either individually or combined together. So as per the Annex 1, like, Annex 1 specifies or expects these four kinds of control measures, contamination control measures, which are either design controls, for example, um, design phase of facilities to equipment, utilities, processes, to ensure that sterile product, they meet their quality, desired quality attributes, which includes designing the facilities, not only facilities, but designing the utilities, equipment, HVAC system, classification, and so on. So design controls ensure that the manufacturing environment supports the production of or provide right environment for manufacturing of the sterile dosage forms. Similarly, now this is the second layer. Like, having only design controls would not help. So perhaps there can be addition, it can be strengthened further by adding another layer of, let's say, technological tools and systems. For example, automation system, for monitoring, temperature, pressure differentials, humidity, and air quality in the clean rooms. And these technical controls ensure that manufacturing environment is maintained all the time. And in case there is any issue with respect to control of any parameter that can have a direct or indirect impact on the quality of the product, can be immediately identified so that corrective actions can be taken at right time. Then the third layer on it is like you have nicely designed equipment, facilities with proper technical controls, but without proper procedures and instructions that govern the manufacturing process and various different activities in the aseptic processing. So these controls would be design and technical controls could be useless. So procedural controls, they ensure that all steps in manufacturing process are consistently followed and are always in compliance with the corresponding GMP requirements, thus minimizing the risk of the product contamination. And last but not the least, and most important, would be the organization controls. That means particularly the management structure, responsibilities, and various training programs. So, uh, for example, a strong quality management system that oversees all aspects of the production. So, organization controls ensure that personnel are competent and capable of performing their duties in a manner that ensures product quality and the patient safety. So, 7 by 4, these seven potential risk factors and four control measures is the complete risk metric, which can be evaluated for each manufacturing step. I mean, you can, when you have to establish a contamination control strategy. So this is the metric, you should be looking for when evaluating the capability of each manufacturing process step. Okay, so the third point, which is extremely important in the Annex 1, as Mr. Khante has clearly mentioned, that contamination control strategy is the key feature of the revised Annex 1. And uh, what I would like to show on this specific slide that not contamination free is that a life cycle approach is ongoing but not periodic review and updates as needed. So this is a continuous life cycle approach. This small table over here, uh, it comes from uh, our experience of providing consultancy to lot many manufacturing firms, where we have helped them develop their CCS, contamination control strategy. So we normally use a 663 point checklist, and every point is traceable to a clause in the Annex 1. And here's what we have learned, that when we correlate these 663 checks to the 16 contamination control strategy elements that are defined in section 2.5 of the Annex 1, so what we see, that top three, they are monitoring systems, which appears 111 times, followed by premises and equipment, which appears 81 times, and third is personnel, which appears 71 times. And that's what very clearly matches with these seven potential risk factors and so on. Now, how to control these are the next 2 points, which are appearing. So that means top five CCS elements are related to three related to um, monitoring system, premises, equipment, personnel, and remaining two, which are 61, which is the process risk management, and 10th is the process validation. So that means process risk validation is integral part, as Mr. Khante has also mentioned in his talk. So before we dive in, so this slide shows, this is a FDA published observation by product category. So the data shown here includes all drug inspections, not exclusively the sterile. However, our analysis and various different industry reports, they show that sterile injectable facilities consistently receive exceptionally high number of GMP observations. So if we have to consider here, so almost around 40 to 50% observations are primarily related to the sterile manufacturing setup and so on. So this is just to give you an idea, like if we do not follow these controls properly, so perhaps these um, uh, leads to the compliance actions, and which can be ranging from warning import alerts and so on. Okay, so that was kind of uh, kind of setting the stage, and now I would like to go into the normal compliance challenges we face in the manufacturing of sterile products and so on. So uh, what our experience shows, like in spite of having very ultra modern manufacturing infrastructure, the compliance often fails due to either of these four major observations, which can be weak quality risk management application, um, or otherwise lack of scientific rationale behind the decision taken, superficial deviation investigations, and superficial deviation investigation automatically leads to ineffective corrective and preventive actions. Misalignment between the validated protocols and the actual behavior. I mean, not following the SOPs and established, standards, and so. So, what does this mean, and what does it mean to the FDA, and what FDA wants to communicate or convey to the manufacturers through these observations? Like, they demand defensible, rational life cycle control and cross-functional accountability, and that is what is coming out. These three, they are linking straight to all these four controls that we have discussed in the previous slide. Next major observations or big challenge is design without dynamic justification. HVAC, which is directly is uh, uh, kind of system which provides the right environment for manufacturing of the sterile products. The smoke studies and particularly the design is not matching with is not providing a dynamic justification. So what are the frequent 483 observations on these topics are like poor smoke studies which lack dynamic intervention simulation. That means perhaps all interventions or some interventions not covered, or none of the interventions are covered in the smoke studies. Airflow visualization is not linked with the media fill interventions. So sometimes, what happens that some interventions are actually what is expected, that, whatever interventions happen in a normal product manufacturing process, the same interventions with respect to the extent, the method of executing those interventions, duration must be simulated in the media fill as well. And it should be evaluated in the smoke studies as well, just to make sure that what impact it can have on the product quality. I mean, the interventions, if they can lead to or they can potentially impact the contamination of the product, so that must be evaluated, and that is lacking. So that means these 3 points: smoke studies, interventions in the manufacturing operation, as well as interventions performed during the media fill interventions. So these points, three dots, are not properly connected. Airflow visualization skipped after changes. That means, like, usually what happens that airflow visualization studies in normally is a biannual activity, maybe performed once in 2 years or 3 years in some facilities. However, during this long duration, lots of changes happen. Changes happen with respect to procedures, equipment, facilities, and so on. So most of the times, airflow visualizations, they are skipped after the changes. That means you do not know exactly that change, what impact that change may have on the airflows. So perhaps those things are mostly skipped. That is also one of the major observation. Pressure differentials unjustified or poorly monitored. So either they are not justified to uh, to very strongly indicate that these the kind of pressure differentials which are maintained are good enough to provide right conditions for manufacturing of the sterile products, or they are poorly monitored. So what FDA wants to communicate here is like, they are concerned. They want to share concern through these observations. They are sharing their concern with respect to the unseen turbulences and its impact, compromised airflow, and poor stability assurance. I mean, they are trying to um, raise a concern on sterility assurance due to unseen turbulences in your airflow or the compromised airflows. Third topic, which is most commonly observed, is SOP's gowning discipline. And primarily Recurring gaps in the sterile facilities related to the governing discipline are inadequate gown controls, gaps in gowning, inadequate glove disinfection. When I say inadequate gown control, means that means right from selection of the right material for the gowns to their proper, you know, um, their construction, I would say, and the maintenance throughout their life cycle, inspection and maintenance throughout the life cycle. That is gown control. When I say gaps in gowning, that means many times, most common observation like, uh, gloves not weared properly, or there is a gap between the goggles and the body. You can see goggles and the cap. You can see some portion of your forehead through these gaps and so on. So this kind of observations and inadequate glove disinfection. No risk assessed logs of operator interventions. That is another observation, common observation. Only SOP based retraining, no hands on validation. So that means, just in most of the companies, I mean, I have seen in my experience, um, that SOP based training is given, whereas it is not verified on the ground. No hands on validation, like, whether people are really following those SOPs or not. Supervisors fail to enforce the behavior. That means internal audits are not behavior focused. So that means the audits are mostly, Mr. Khante also mentioned, like checklist based. What FDA expects here is a visible control over aseptic behavior and accountability at all the levels. That is what FDA expects, when they are giving these observations, this is their expectation. So next big challenge, compliance challenge is environmental monitoring and the contamination control strategy. Systems that don't talk. That means environmental monitoring and CCS are kind of siloed systems. They should be interconnected, but most of the times they lack those interconnection. So what are the key um, deficiencies that FDA cite on this topic are excursion investigations closed with the generic cause. That means without any specific reason. That itself indicates, I mean, lack of or weak investigation process. Alert action limits set without scientific justification. So usually you have normally, the regulators provide the limits for the aseptic, particularly in the aseptic processing or manufacturing of sterile product. So these limits, environmental monitoring limits for different grades of the clean rooms are defined in the regulatory guidelines. However, those are very general limits. I mean, of course, you cannot exceed those limits, but you are expected to be better than the specified limits. And that for that purpose, you should have proper, scientific justification. And so that means, those alert action limits, they should be set with proper scientific justification, which is data backed, with your own data backed. And that is lacking most of the times. That is the next observation. CCS not updated after changes or tied to the kappa or deviation system. That is the next observation. Uh, then environmental monitoring data is not trended meaningfully or is not zone specific. So that is another big observation. And what FDA expects here, that FDA expects a proactive environmental monitoring, which is, kind of a living system. That means, it's a live system and uh, and a risk-based CCS framework. This is what FDA expects when they give you this kind of observations. Next big area is media fields, and particularly misdesigns and the investigation failures. These two are the key problem areas here. So, what are the common FD observations on this topic? Are media fields not simulating worst case interventions? Missed alignment between interventions in media field and production. Contaminations attributed to isolated events without even supporting trend data. And no personal requalification or APS protocol revision post failure. So this seems, very common. These 4 points are very common, not simulating worst case interventions. So with respect to worst case could be with respect to the number of interventions or duration of the interventions and the method of executing the interventions and so on. Missed alignment between interventions in media fill and production. That means during media fill and production, perhaps the interventions are not handled exactly in same manner, or perhaps same interventions not followed in both the cases, because it's the purpose of the media fill and requirement of the media fill, in fact, that it should be as close simulation as possible to the routine product manufacturing facility, and that's why the regulators, they would look for how do you perform interventions in your routine production and how do you perform same intervention in during the media fill. So what does FDA expects here? Expect simulation of reality, deep investigation, and CAPAs without scientific traceability, with scientific traceability. Visual inspection is another blind spot, and another key challenge, compliance challenge area, and particularly blind spots in trending and qualification. That is the main a blind spot in the visual inspection, and the frequent issues are generally poorly defined defect categories. That means critical, major, minor. Please mind, there should be a proper risk assessment method for defining a critical, major, as well as the minor defect, because in one situation, for example, the dose or the population in which that product is given, or clinical condition of the patient, or the mode of administration, the defect which is major in a particular set can be minor or it can be critical in another set of conditions with respect to the patient uh, population. I mean, in whether it is given to the children or the adult or ailing patient and so on, right? Lack of statistical sampling, process capability assessment, that is another big area. um, Inspectors not re-qualified after deviations or repeated misses is another another big observation under this heading. And inadequate trending to correlate process data with the complaints. I mean, so process performance evaluation is done only with internal data, but not validated with the external information, external data, which comes in the form of complaints and uh, grievances, for example. So what does FDA expect here? It expects a kind of risk-based VI, visual inspection system, challenge sets, and trending integration into the batch decision making process. The next big topic or compliance challenge is a container closure integrity, and particularly life cycle gaps undermining the stability assurance. And what are the major observations here are the CCI validation only done at the initial qualification stage. No linkage of the sealing parameters, including the torque and the pressure and the speed, transport simulation, or the stability data. So that means not linked to either the sealing parameters or the transport simulation or stability or all of them. So perhaps this is another area which is um, uh, big area. Majority observations obtained this specific area. Um, Batches released despite failure in the torque verification. And this seems to be, another observation, big observation. What FDA expects here is a life cycle based CCI strategy, container closure integrity strategy, by using destructive as well as non-destructive methods, and integration of the CCI data with batch disposition and the change controls. Next big topic, or next big compliance challenge, is data integrity, and particularly in the environmental monitoring, audit trails, and the operator logs. So, what are the common DI violations that are reported or cited by the regulators? Are deleted EM excursions, retests without QA review, shared user IDs and disabled audit trails, manual logs with missing metadata and backdated entries. So I am very sure this sounds, very familiar. What FDA expects in these kind of situations is the Alcoa Plus compliance. I'm very sure you guys know what is Alcoa compliance, secure access, and the real-time traceability. Periodic DI audits across EM, QC, and the aseptic records. Then the next big challenge is investigations, root cause analysis, and kappa. And this is a paradox actually. If you have a weak investigation, root cause analysis, you will have weak kappas. So generally what it indicates to FDA is, they, like, company, if you have weak investigation and weak kappas, so it's direct indicator of that, organization is interested only in fixing symptoms but not improving the systems. So what are the common citations here? Are use of human error as the default conclusion. So this is very common. However, no human error can be called as, every human error is just a visible cause. However, behind it, you will always find, a kind of systemic problem and so on. So, use of human error as default conclusion, lack of cross-functional root cause analysis, kappas that don't address systemic or behavioral root causes. So, every failure eventually would have some or the other systemic weakness. And so that's why if you do not get to the root cause, proper root cause, I mean true root cause, so your kappas would be inadequate and you are assured of getting the same problems again and again. So what does FDA expect here is use of tools with 5i with investigation tools such as 5i, Fishbone, and trend reviews. Clear linkage between investigation depth and the kappa strength. So that's what FDA expects in this particular case. So these were, I just shared with you, few common observations and broad challenges based on our experience interacting and working with lots of clients of ours. So now I would go to the next couple of slides, which are more about, how to fix, these problems. And although we have seen around 8 or 9 normal compliance challenges, but if you classify everything, the roots will be, almost common to these. And that's why this compliance strategy, I would say, we will discuss on primarily three or four compliance strategies over here. The first itself is risk-based cleanroom qualification and the requalification. That means whatever qualifications we are doing with respect to, for specifically for achieving the desired or right conditions for manufacturing of sterile products, they should align, qualification should align with criticality of the process and the product risk. They should properly integrate with the environment monitoring and airflow visualization. Um, like their, kind of that should become basic, their qualification rationale and so on. Then it should define properly requalification triggers, not necessarily the fixed periodic frequencies. For example, every year you do requalification and so on, not only limited to that, but cause based also, which can be like, changes, excursions, and various different, corrective and preventive actions resulting from the excursion investigations. And then linking qualification protocols with the contamination control strategy. So this is how we should be able to address holistically and practically all these kind of challenges that we have just discussed in the previous slides. Next, CCS, contamination control strategy. So normally this is, what we see is kind of, a static document. Make it a living and dynamic document. And the keywords here are connect, update, use, establish, and ensure. So when I say connect, it means connect the CCS with real-time EM trends and deviation logs. So that means, your strategy should be that whenever you see any unexpected trends, so perhaps it should initiate it, not necessarily a non-complying EM observations, but the observations which are normally not expected in your set of working conditions. So perhaps they should also be linked with deviation logs. So that connect is extremely important. Whenever there is a change, if this CCS doesn't change, but at least assessment should be done, and if required, then accordingly your contamination strategy should change accordingly. So whenever there will be a change in the facility, process, product, then perhaps it should trigger the review of CCS and a need to evaluate if any upgrade is required into it. Use CCS to drive training, investigation scope, and audit readiness. So this is the area from where you should be able to derive the training needs of your people, the scope of investigation, and the readiness for any regulatory inspection and so on. Establish periodic CCS reviews by a cross-functional team. Even if there are no changes, but CCS must be reviewed periodically and so on. And last but not the least is ensuring CCS is actively used, not just archived, for audit. So it doesn't become, a kind of dead document that must be, ensured and so on. Next is the gowning discipline. So as the title itself mentions here, we often hear this phrase like train like it's a process step, but we rarely do. We treat gowning with same rigor as we treat aseptic processing steps. So answer maybe no, it's kind of very mundane and routine activity. Just slip on and get inside as quickly as possible. So replace the induction only training with periodic visual based coaching. That means when you are continuously operating, how your people are following or what are their gowning disciplines. And if you see any kind of deviations there or kind of unexpected observations, so perhaps it should be continuously fed back to the team. Sometimes using video audits can be a good idea and can help improve the gowning discipline. Conduct mock gowning drills and failure simulations. Implement real time coaching by trained QA observers, and treating gowning as critical GMP activity, including KPIs like any other uh, activity, and ownership can perhaps help in improving the gowning discipline. So this area is also I mean, this specific strategy, use of barrier technology wherever it is possible, can get rid of lot many issues and so on. If you see revised Annex 1, which is now current, you would see that barrier technology is considered as a mainstream manufacturing technology, and the Annex 1 guideline very clearly mentions that if you are using any alternate technology, that means if you are using a conventional clean room technology, then perhaps you should have a proper and very robust, risk assessment to demonstrate that how this technology would help you consistently achieve, the desired product quality and so on. So, why this? Because yes, I have already explained that this is one of the emerging expectations of the regulators, and but it has got many, and there is a reason also, because it has got many benefits. Like RABs isolators, they reduce human contamination risk significantly, and that's a fact. Um, Evaluate feasibility during facility upgrades or the new projects. I mean, if you guys are already using a conventional clean room technology, so perhaps during any upgrade, your upgrade programs, so perhaps think about combining or upgrading your conventional clean room technology into the isolation technology or the barrier technology. Um, if not possible to upgrade or not possible to use because of any inherent limitations of your manufacturing setup, then justify with risk mitigation and operational control rationale. And this document is extremely important. This is what would save you with lots of hassles during the regulatory inspections. So ensure robust procedures for open door interventions and glove port handling. Like these are something which are useful for saving your saving you from getting citations from the regulatory inspections. Align barrier tech decisions with CCS and risk-based investment. Now we have discussed about uh, the main compliance challenges as well as the possible improvement strategies. So now I would like to go on to, because this entire presentation is focused on the leadership and so on. So perhaps I would like to bring in this very important point, which is culture of compliance and why leadership matters, right? So we often talk about SOPs, systems, training, but in reality, compliance lives or dies by the culture. And culture, especially in the sterile operations, is a direct reflection of leadership behavior. If a supervisor ignores a gowning lapses because production must not stop, that sets a kind of precedence. And if a manager says we'll clean it later during an intervention, that's the new norm. It becomes kind of new norm. So what we tolerate, even silently, with that becomes eventually our culture. Annex 1 and FDA both emphasize this shift. They are no longer looking only at documentation, but they are observing leadership intent, their floor presence, and tone at the top. That means at the leadership level. As leaders, I can share last example. One of my clients, they had FDA inspection, and somebody from the corporate, he also was part of that inspection, and he was present in the audit room, and he started intervening in some discussion, and the auditor clearly asked him a question. When did you go to the plant? What was your last visit date to the plant, and so on? So that's very, very clear that topmost leadership intent, floor presence is extremely important, and so on. So as leader, we must model the right behavior, reinforce expectations even when it's uncomfortable, and create an environment where people feel safe to speak up about risks. We have seen it over and over at a plant with great systems but weak leadership still struggles with compliance. But a plant with strong, visible, and engaged leadership often succeeds even with fewer resources. So the message is very simple. If you want a culture of compliance, lead it, don't just audit it. Next, so for a company involved in sterile drug manufacturing, the most critical asset, more than the batch record, more than the formulation, is the clean room itself. Because every element of your business, your product quality, your regulatory approval, your reputation, um, hinges on whether your clean room is fully under control. And yet, if many facilities clean room control is treated like a QA task, so then let's be clear, it's not. So contamination control is not just about gowning or EM results. It's all about the HVAC system, which is engineered by utilities, the personnel who are trained by the production, or the maintenance, which is scheduled by engineering, and the SOPs that are written and enforced by QA. So that means clean room control is everyone's job, not any specific department. Like, it's productions, they do use these rooms. So that means, they are only responsible. So that means, you know, it's a responsibility of all. Because in sterile manufacturing, the clean room isn't just a facility, it's the heart of your business. Um, Another thing which is very common, when you see that there are excellent SOPs, but the gap between the intent and the reality is very, very evident. When you go and audit, you see the client and the regulators also, very they would cite, these kind of observations. So difference between the intent and reality. So that means, like, SOPs must reflect how processes are actually executed, and whatever is executed, that is properly defined in the SOP as such. So both should be matching. Uh, so perhaps, to improve upon this area, use floor audits and deviation data to revise and simplify the SOPs. Training should include simulation, behavior coaching, and question and answers rather than just, a kind of simple formality sort of checkbox or quiz questions and so on. Internal audits must test execution, not just documentation completeness. So these are certain things, which I just wanted to clarify here on this specific slide. Going to the next one. Now, so let's now address a gap that's often visible, um, matching intent with the reality. So you may have a well-written SOP, you may have trained every operator and completed every quiz, you may have audited, checklists and compliance dashboards, but the real question is what's happening on the shop floor. So does that SOP reflect what people actually do? Does the training prepare them for real-world scenarios like gowning under pressure or responding to a minor EM excursions? And does the audit check behavior or just, check boxes? So these are a couple of, important aspects. So SOPs must reflect how processes are actually executed and so on. So let's now connect everything we have discussed uh, to the foundation of lasting compliance and the culture. So in our experience, a mature compliance culture doesn't depend on fear or a non-stop supervision. It depends on two key elements, which is visibility and accountability. So that means these are all key elements. Like, one, supervisor must act as daily quality role models, celebrate compliance behavior, don't just punish, non-compliance. So that, people are not, kind of pressurized to follow only and the right that. Build visual accountability tools like whiteboards, intervention logs, and so on, and embed GMP metrics in the performance appraisals as well, not only in the management reviews, but performance appraisal of the people, so that they become accountable, so that their performance becomes visible and they become accountable for their performance. So now coming to the end, so these are five leadership actions, key takeaways you can say from this presentation from my side, along with I'm sure Mr. Khante would also like to pass on this key conclusion to all the participants over here. First takeaway is elevate the sterility assurance to a site-wide priority. I mean, it should become priority for everyone on the site, and particularly a top-down approach, priority for the management, so that how to do it, like embed it into management reviews, dashboards, and team goals. Second key point is drive risk-based execution, not just documentation. So don't focus only on the documentation, but drive actual risk-based execution. Many times you would see that all these risk assessments are just a kind of activity, um, has no strength into them. So not just documentation, but actual, so that it requires scientific rationale for every critical control can be established. Build a culture of ownership which is beyond only one department. And usually, that department is QA. So hold production, maintenance, and all other departments jointly accountable, not individually, but jointly accountable for the culture. Review and revise the site contamination control strategy, EM and gowning programs regularly, more often than than the traditional frequency of year or 6 months and so on. And last but not the least, and very important message to the all the managers and the management level, leadership level, that walk the floor, lead by example, walk the floor, ask tough questions, reward good GMP behaviors, and so on. So with this I end my talk, and uh, fortunately we have Manas also with us, who has a lot of experience. I would take back to the previous slides where we identified the top three kind of areas of control, and the significance given by the Annex 1 also. Out of it, the most important is personnel, because the highest level of contamination which is spread into the clean rooms are people. And one of the important aspects, so perhaps with his experience and with his knowledge, I would request him to shed some light specifically on the personnel and that aspect. Manas, over to you, and this is your first slide.
Like you mentioned, Manish, and rightly pointed out, personal related risks are now the third most frequently raised concern under the revised Annex 1 guidelines. And today I would like to present my perspective on this critical area. The structure around, like you said, four control measures in the context of personnel contamination control. So you all know that the biggest, risk in the contamination comes from the personnel. Some studies suggest that it is almost like in tune of 75% of contamination chances from the, and there could be contamination from people, garment, skin, even breathing. So there could be contamination through the people. So I'll focus on the force control measures, like Manish you pointed out in your beginning of your slide. So we'll start with the design control. So maybe uh, in the design control, let's begin with the laundry and the garment. I'll not go in detail, but garment is the last line of defense between your product and the potential contamination, and we cannot afford, or simply we cannot afford them to take lightly. In fact, I have come across with facility where single door washers are installed inside the controlled areas, called as a clean room laundry. And also the goggles are being wiped with an IPA without any traceability. There's no recording that how many times goggles have been washed. It's practically impossible for them to take account. I think these practices are clear violation under the revised Annex 1. So our approach has been build a contamination control supply chain that exactly mirror the GMP standards, same as your formulation facility. That includes the strict segregation between soil and clean areas. So we use the barrier washer to put garment from the soil area, and then in the clean area we are unloading the garment in the validated environment. Uh, we have also noted that frequent regulatory observation also has where the single door washers are installed in the controlled areas, which normally they call it as a clean room laundry. And also the people are washing manufacturing facilities are washing the goggles and wiping through the IPA without any traceability. I think these are some clear violations under the Annex 1. What we are, I was sharing that, in our approach, uh, has been built contamination control supply chain that mirrors the GMP standard, same as your formation facility, uh, which includes a strict segregation between soil and clean areas, uh, fully validated environment for every step of garment processing. I have also noted, and the frequent regulatory observation has also been made on the garment design. So the garment plays a big role. Observation has been made on the garment designs, like you mentioned in your presentation, also Manish, that skin exposures has been noted by the regulators, and the observation has been shared with the facilities, manufacturing facilities. That's why we take a highly engineered approach, selecting right fabric, looking into the fabric qualification, design the garment and goggles according to the IST guidelines, validating every product for performance and the life cycle. And every use, the garment undergo controlled decontamination using validated and repeatable processes. So when they return to your facility, they are just as productive as they were delivered on day one. So that's where we are. I was highlighting about the design control part. Moving into the technical control, you know, it isn't about the cleaning the garment. It is also managing them with precision, traceability, and data. And here we use the technology. As many facility I have seen manual logging or at the best barcoding system for tracking the wash cycle events. Unfortunately, these are prone to human error and can create compliance gaps. That's why many professional laundry uses the RFID tracking, which offers real-time garment traceability and full life cycle management. We actively monitor the environment and also the environment as well as the particulate matter using the latest system like Helmke drum body box test as well as the settle placed for the maintaining the GMP standards. So technology is nowadays playing a big role, reducing the human error, and definitely at Lindstrom we have those in place. Then moving into the third control, which in your slide it was a procedural control. Here where the rubber meets the road actually. So where NX1 becomes the part of daily routine. The guideline, like you said, only work they are actually followed. So our system transforms gowning protocol into actionable and each garment is tracked, monitored through its usage life cycle and retired after defined life cycle. Regulator these days are actually looking for complete traceability, ensures garment don't exceed validated usage threshold, and the documents for the every step. So you need to set up that's always audit ready and always aligned with current regulatory expectations. It isn't about the scrambling before the inspection. So we normally, when the inspections comes, we scramble. But I think it is building a workflow where compliance is the second nature, like you and Mr. Kante also highlighted. Moving to the fourth quadrant, which is the organizational control. In the organizational control, even Mr. Kante also mentioned earlier that none of these will succeed unless people truly believe in it. And that's where our role as a partner makes the difference. I have seen the operator while donning gown touches the floor, which is again a critical observation, right? Clear OCP and easy to follow work instruction and rigorous training. You also highlighted in your presentation that there should be a clear instruction as well. People should be trained through the videos and a different way of imparting training to improve the gowning, donning, and doffing, right? So, as shared in my esteemed panelist, we must focus on the mindset as well as culture. We train people not just how to gown, but on why gown matters. That's very, very important. Because true compliance doesn't come from ticking boxes, it comes from the people understanding why it is needed. And when that happens, I think behavior changes. Then that when your contamination control strategy goes being a procedure to become a real shared culture. And the last, I'll just wrap up with that CCS for personnel is not just about garment or laundry. It is about building a smart, integrated system, one that grounded in sound design and supported by traceability, technology, and driven by clear procedures and brought to life through partnership and culture. Yeah, back to you, Manish. Then.
To all the panel members for their amazing inputs. Firstly, we would like to thank Sham sir for his amazing inputs. We really appreciate your presentation. Thank you so much, Sham sir, for your informative session. We would also like to take a moment and thank Manish sir for his talk. That was amazing, and we are really grateful that you took some time to share your expertise with all of us. We would also like to express our gratitude to Manas sir. We really want to thank you for making the content accessible to everybody, and thank you so much, sir, for your deep support. Thank you so much, everybody.